So, my title of the sermon is The Heart of Restoration. And basically, I wasn't planning to make a sermon anytime soon, but it came up with Hundokhe. And when I do Hundokhe with my brother, I always make a lot of comments, And so basically, it's inspired from Hundokhe, and yeah, it's more going to be like comments. And yeah, but then I felt very much like there's so much I want to share about this topic. Lately, because we've been reading it over and over, this topic of restoration, and I figured out the more I read it, the more I want to read it, because I feel there's something I still got to understand. And yeah, and then at some point I thought, okay, the most important in restoration, I figured out, was the heart of restoration. Then I thought, okay, I might want to share this. So what is restoration? So I Googled it, first of all. And then I found a definition saying that it is actually the act or the process of returning something to its earlier condition or position, or to its owner. Some kind of restitution, some kind of fixing something. And I thought that was interesting. So then I got back to the Divine Principle book, and from Chopin's words in the Divine Principle, we say that the providence of restoration refers to God's work to restore human beings to our original unfallen state, so that we may fulfill the purpose of creation. So yeah, that is very clear. So the providence of restoration refers to the restoration of human beings to an original state. Okay, then of course we know the theory, and I'm not going to give a DP lecture now. We know there is the foundation of faith in the principle of restoration. That has to do with the central figure. Most of the time, it's ourselves, having to offer something, usually an indemnity condition, and over a period of time. But you notice I put here indemnity condition offering in red, as it is something that sticks out and sometimes doesn't feel so good, indemnity condition. But then I put the time period in green because it's only for a time period. So actually, like I said, this applies to everything. And this first line on the top is mostly internal. Most of the time, it's internal. And we're going to see with the Hundokhe some of the reasons why we see it's more internal. But then the foundation of substance is more practical or external, which is like Cain-Abel relationship, subject-object. But as I say, the more I read about restoration, I understand it applies to everything. And the restoration could be the restoration of anything from your health to relationships to whatever. And the principle is the same. There's an internal condition, and there's something practical you have to do about it. And even it's between the mind, the body, the subject partner, object partner roles, how you take care of your body, for example, to restore your health, or how you take care of your environment to restore anything, So the foundation for the Messiah, of course, we know it being to meet the Messiah, the main line of restoration, but this foundation for the Messiah is actually as well a foundation for unity with God's principle, unity with God's ideal. It could be the foundation for whatever we want to restore. So I'm going to read some of the words from the book, The Victory of Love, from Hunjinim. And he says, the first thing that I want to say about indemnity is that it does not equate to suffering. Another thing that indemnity is not is punishment. So it's a very important concept. We shouldn't see indemnity as some kind of a punishment, something we have to endure. He says, actually, the real key and the secret to paying indemnity is your sincerity. indemnity is actually a gift from God. Indemnity is a grace from God. Even you can think that indemnity equals love from God. God is the source of love and not torture. Therefore, indemnity must be an expression of God's love. When you experience indemnity, you should at the same time or as a result of indemnity experience God's love. If all you experience is suffering, you are not paying indemnity. So this really hit me, because then my perspective changed. Like, if I pay indemnity to restore anything, actually it's a grace, it's a gift, it's something lucky, because I'm getting to somewhere. It's an opportunity. It is a means. It is a grace, actually. So, like I said, this is more like a hundokri with some kind of insight. So the purpose of indemnity is restoration, still from the same book. And restoration of what? Of your relationship with God. Therefore, if true indemnity has been paid, the net result will be that you feel closer to God. If you feel further away, then indemnity has not been paid. And this is sometimes difficult because sometimes it's not easy or it's a struggle, and we don't always see it like we feel God's love when we're paying indemnity. Okay, if we do 40 kiombe or whatever we're doing, because it's a stress, because it's not easy, it doesn't feel like God's love. But if we don't feel God's love, indemnity has not been paid. Meaning that although we might not feel it as we are paying the indemnity, in our minds, we have to recognize that it is actually a grace by God that we can do this. And then if we then focus our mind to feel what is behind it, then it becomes indemnity. It's actually a payment. So the most important here is the heart of the restoration. If we have the right heart, then it takes value. So many times a person will get some physical injury and others will say you are paying indemnity. Please don't think that physical suffering is indemnity. It might be, but then it might not be. Indemnity is only spiritual. So unless there is some spiritual benefit as a result of the suffering, no indemnity has been paid. Artistic indemnity is spiritual. Therefore, a small amount of artistic indemnity can be far superior to a great amount of physical suffering. It's all decided by how much you become closer to God as a result. So once again, this hit me like it's very much about the heart in the indemnity condition or in the restoration process. And another quote, let me also clear up something about the confusion of lesser and equal indemnity. So lesser indemnity is always the case in the Unification Church. You never have to pay full amount. Because of the true parents, it's always lesser amount. You never even have to pay equal indemnity. That is an Old Testament concept back before Jesus and back before anyone knew about the parental heart of God. Greater indemnity will never have to be paid as long as you maintain a sincere heart. Again, it's all about the heart. When we have the right heart in whatever we are trying to restore, we will pay lesser indemnity. Abraham, when he had to sacrifice his son, Isaac, was not paying greater indemnity. Sure, it was greater than the sacrifice of the animals, but it was not greater than all the sins of himself and the human ancestors. Abraham, through it all, was sincere to do God's will, so he was actually paying lesser indemnity. He did not in the end have to kill his son, he only had to offer him, which was tremendous artistic indemnity. So, tremendous artistic indemnity was the heart with which he was doing it. It was something he just had to close his eyes and do, okay, whatever happens. But just that was so much indemnity which was already paid at that moment that nothing physical was needed next. So we know the first attempt of restoration with Cain and Abel, who both made an offering. So again, the indemnity is not about the offering, because Cain as well did an offering. But it wasn't really considered an indemnity. Why? So as we read the Genesis, chapter 4, verse 3 to 7, in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought up an offering, fat portions from the firstborn of his flock. So he didn't just take any offering or some of his flock, but he chose fat portions from the firstborn of his flock. There's something here about his heart, about the choices he makes in doing his offering. So the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering, he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, since sin is crouching at your door, it desires to have you, but you must rule over it." So again, God loves restoration more than anyone. From the beginning of time till today, he actually made these principles of restoration, which are the way, the means that allows us to be or to become what we should be. So whether it's restoration of your health, we all have things to restore. Whether it's restoration in the family, relationships, friendships, finance, anything you want to restore, there's a way, there's a principle behind it. And it could be anything you want to restore. But remember, the indemnity is for only a period of time. So that gives us some endurance. We know it's for a time. We know it's a grace. We know it's a blessing. We know it's an opportunity. And then we hold on. Like the song said, put your hand to the plow and hold on. So whatever was lost has to be restored, and whatever was never yet ought to be. Because there are many things that need to be restored that we didn't lose, but we never had. Because we inherited things, maybe some kind of a burden, some kind of ancestral sin or anything that we need to restore. We didn't lose it, but it was never, it ought to be. So all these things, we can just understand that as long as we have the right heart, understanding is really good. It helps. When you know, okay, I broke a glass, I know how to restore it. I did misuse some money, I know how to restore it. But sometimes we don't always know, and we don't always understand the circumstances. But it's not always necessary, because there are 4 types of sin. We know original sin, we're not directly responsible about it, but as well, hereditary and other sins, like the sins of the whole, the sins of the group. We're not responsible directly for all the 4 types of sin, but then we might not as well know or understand how to restore it. But it doesn't really matter that much, because as long as we have the right heart and attitude, things will turn up. We're going to see this a bit more clearly with these words from Hunjinim, which say, if you see a problem or encounter a difficulty, you must take that as a sign of hope that victory is coming your way. It is an indication that you are heading towards true restoration, recreation, and resurrection. Problems and difficulties should enable you to say, I know this is the right way. Would you think that way, or would you turn back? So many people have turned back and refused to go through the door of victory, but God has never turned back. And so we must not turn back either. We are heading to the end of the year. We are looking forward to 2023. There are battles we are fighting. There are many things we are going through, and we are moving forward, but we should never turn back. Your heart of responsibility is the key point for fulfilling your responsibility. Again, the heart of responsibility. That's the key point, the heart. Doesn't matter if you know how you're going to get there or not. That will sort out itself. By investing your heart in people, brothers and sisters, completely to the limit, your heart is growing. You are learning. I know it's difficult to believe this. It's difficult to understand that this really could be the foundation for victory. But all the organization that you are doing now can be based on heart, can be successful, and can be done once the heart is in the right place. Once the heart is in the right place. Trust that. If you don't have the right heart first, all the organization in the world won't make any difference. The heart is the most important thing, the heart. What is your heart? What is the content of your heart? What is the level and depth of your heart? What is the level and depth of embracing people and feeling responsible? So, whatever my neighbor, my brother, my sister, my parent is going through, I should somehow feel responsible that I need to have a heart for that, a heart of compassion. Many times we kind of like can get judgmental, but if we feel responsible, then our perspective will change, but it starts from the heart. So you are facing a real challenge because the world is not yet perfect, and you are living within an imperfect environment with imperfect people. Benjamin even said that True Father himself did not reach his full potential because he was living in an imperfect environment. And so if True Father himself could not reach his full potential by being raised in this environment, then we don't have to beat ourselves down. We just have to put our hands on the plow and hold on. So that is restoration. You must overcome these circumstances in different progressive periods. So even when you overcome, you need to create that quality within your original mind, which enables you to constantly go forward. So I highlight certain things because when I read it over and over again, then it hits me, something I read I didn't actually notice. But he says, you have to create that quality. It's not something that you might just have or just comes upon you. You have to create it. We are co-creators. That's part of our portion of responsibility. So we have to create that quality within our original mind. We might think, oh, the original mind is perfect, but still we have to create that quality. Create the original heart needed by God and true parents so that you can constantly go ahead. Every day you have to create that type of heart and mind. Every day you have to see yourself going forward, because you are indemnifying the fall of 6,000 years. So even though you feel death, you still need to go ahead to restore everything. So you have to see yourself, because the mind and the heart go together. And whatever starts in the heart must come to the mind, and you have to see yourself. You have to envision. You have to believe, and believing is seeing what is not seen physically. So even though you hear many things about yourself, you still need to go ahead to restore yourself and your family. That is the restoration of mankind from generation to generation. A change is taking place in each and every one of us. There is pain involved in some cases, but we have to go through and understand the significance of what we represent. We are the beginning of a new race, God's race, which includes all colors, nationalities, backgrounds, and so forth. So I can see here, we actually practically are of all nationalities here, backgrounds, and it's very interesting how God works. He will amaze people because he chooses people who never expect to be chosen. But somehow God knows us very well, and how much we can love and stretch our hearts toward the restoration of all mankind. That is what is most important. Therefore, physical acts of indemnity that you perform are almost insignificant compared to the spiritual and artistic realities of what they represent. Once our hearts have made certain conditions, then the grace of God brings about tremendous restoration. So we have to be very careful not to stop that from happening. Because if we keep the right heart, then the grace of God brings about tremendous restoration. So our attitude in our everyday life as we move forward, as we are restoring ourselves and everything, is what matters the most. Of all the billions of people living in this entire world, you are the ones whom God called. Many others were called, but they didn't respond. Yet each of you had faith to follow through parents, putting aside whatever it was you had been doing in your lives for the higher calling of God. For this reason, you are especially unique people in the entire providential history of restoration. Through your efforts, you are securing a place in Heavenly Father's heart, which no one else in history will ever occupy, be it past, present, or future. Only those of you attending my Father during this time will know such a blessedness upon your arrival in the spirit world. That's why you should never give up, nor be defeated, no matter what. The future is bright with promise, the depth and the beauty of which you cannot imagine. But as you know, such a future world depends on us. We must create it through our daily efforts by laying aggressive indemnity conditions. So much can be accomplished in a relatively short time. So here again, the extent to which we stretch our hearts and this time period of indemnity can be shortened. It doesn't have to be a long time. Whatever we're trying to restore, it can be done relatively shortly. So as we cultivate this attitude, then our hearts become sensitive to restoration and our conscience get in tune to restore everything. And we start to notice things. Oh, I didn't speak well nicely to this guy, or I didn't actually use this money correctly. And then we get in tune to these things and things show up. And we remember things. Oh, and now why do I remember this? Oh, I wasn't nice to my neighbor yesterday, or many years back at school. And the moment we get these, things turn up. There's so many experiences when you meet someone in the street asking you for money, or you get an opportunity to make a donation somewhere, and you just remember, oh, that's an opportunity coming up to restore this and that. So things turn up. So as long as we have the right heart, God can use any situation or circumstance as well as his creation. I have experience with horses. I've been dealing with horses all my life, especially training the younger ones, like who were never ridden. And I have to say, creation is very sensitive to everything happening internally in us, spiritually, especially the very young ones. Like, okay, horses who are ridden over 10, 20 years by so many different people, they become numb, spiritually numb, because they learn it's like a coping mechanism. They have to adapt because they deal with so many people and they feel all these energies of different people. Many are not good and they just become numb. They kind of close up. But when you work with the younger horses of 1 year, 2 year olds, trying to start them and extend the rider, they are very fresh and very spiritually open indeed. And sometimes I'm like, mind your business, horse, because I'm riding him and I have this negative thought or anything, and he reacts very abruptly, and I'm like, what are you doing? Come on, this is not your business. And I could think, okay, this is just, but it happened so many times I cannot really count. And yeah, and when you have that kind of connection, so God uses so many things, and as well returning resurrection spirits, you know, they become very active around you when you start being conscious of restoration, because they're like, oh, this is someone we can cooperate with, and they make situations, circumstances come up around you, they keep you on track. And sometimes it's annoying because you don't get away with anything wrong very easily, you know. It's like instant karma, because they don't want to lose you keeping on track. So yeah, that happened quite a few times. And You maybe want to go somewhere you shouldn't go, and you get a tire puncture and all that kind of stuff, because these spirits are now with you and they don't want you to go wrong, because they see you like the light and they say, okay, this guy is helping us for restoration. So God works through our heart, and when we have the right heart, then we have intuition. Like True Father says, intuition is the most or greatest spiritual gift. When our mind gets in tune with our heart to know what to do, what not to do, where to go, where not to go. And then God also works on the circumstances where we need to take action. Things show up, things turn up, opportunities and whatever we need shows the way for restoration. So when we look at True Mother today, despite our struggles as individuals with our fallen nature and everything, we look at the providential figures from the past, like Moses and Jesus, and God always forges a way forward with the right heart. Even when the Israelites were not faithful with Moses, with Jesus, even when we are not faithful today, because someone has the right heart, the central figure, there is always a way forward. And all we need to do is to inherit this enduring heart of God and catch up with that, you know. We all have fallen nature, inherited sins, and we're not going to be perfect overnight, but we have to resolve conflict within and be good to ourselves as well. And okay, many BCs, for instance, they haven't had this kind of conversion experience or anything, but there comes a time when you ask yourself the right questions, you know. At some point, you kind of like, personally, I was like, why am I in this actually, you know? So I didn't really have any conversion, but at some point I was like taking a step back and trying to understand, because there's a lot of theory in our movement, a lot of theory, like I said, and then at some point you realize that the more you read it, there's so much more in it that meets the eye when you just read it. So, yeah. So I'm going to read something else again from the GPA once more. And it says, as an individual, this is the Introduction to Restoration, the last page on Introduction to Restoration. Each one of us is a product of the history of the providence of restoration. Hence, the person who is to accomplish the purpose of history is none other than I, myself. So to become such an historical victor, I must understand clearly the heart of God when he worked with past prophets and saints, the original purpose for which he called them, and the details of the providential missions which he entrusted to them. The path which all the past saints have worked as they strove to fulfill God's providential will is the very path we must walk today. Beyond that, we must continue to the end of the path, even walking trails left untrodden. And that hit me again, because there are many trails which are left untrodden. Restoration is such a vast thing and such a big, complex thing that we don't necessarily have to understand in detail. But if we understand the heart, there are many trails untrodden. There are many things we're going to do that we don't expect. There are many ways God is going to use us to restore things we are not even aware of. And yeah, that's why it really hit me that as we are coming to the close of this year and as we are looking forward to the next year, we should really keep developing the amazing potential and have really a heart of restoration, the heart of willingness of wanting to make things better in our own lives, whatever it is. And not necessarily be hard on ourselves. There are many things we want to do, we don't do. We want to get up on time, we don't. There are so many things, it's at all levels. But when we have the right heart, for example, I struggled at some point in my life with getting up on time, and I would wake up, I would hear the thing, I would put it off, and I got a clue. I say, okay, if I put many alarms every 10 minutes, then I might, I might finally get up on time, you know. But then it didn't really help much. But at some point, when I had the heart of why am I really wanting to get up? What is my heart of doing it? At some point, I realized that I woke up before it rang. I was like, okay, something is working here. Because it was more like in the mind. And that's how it is with restoration. Many things is theoretical, we want to do it. But if we don't connect the real heart to it, if we don't do it from a artistic point of view, then it's not necessarily going to work. So to close this sermon, I'm going to read this final word from the Bible, which is when Paul was speaking to the Corinthians, the church of the Corinthians. He said, "Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice, strive for full restoration." Why is this kind of like, I'm going to go to the last page. I kind of like, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice, strive for full restoration, encourage one another, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. So that was what I had prepared for us today. Please join me in prayer. Dearest, most beloved Heavenly Parent, we really want to thank you for the grace of being here together today, gathered here to worship and to honor you. We are very grateful for the truth and for the principles of restoration that you have established. This grace, this gift that you gave us, which is the principle of restoration, the way and the means to restore everything. Whatever we need to restore in our own lives, in our individual levels, at work, at school, in our families, in our society, in our finance, whatever we need to restore from our ancestors, things we're not aware of, things you want us to restore that we don't know. This is an opportunity, it's a gift, it's a grace. Please use us and help us have the right heart. The right heart, because many things we do, we may actually prevent you from having hold of it because we don't necessarily have the right heart. Allow us to have the right heart that you may claim whatever it is we do good, whatever it is we try to fulfill. That as we close this year, we may really have the right heart and the right mind to step into the next year with a lot of gratitude, with a lot of determination, to never give up, and to be all you expect us to be. We are so very grateful, and we want to offer our lives and everything to you. I pray and report this, representing us here in my name, Ernst, Central Blessed Family, owner of John Ilguk, Jew.